The city skyline glittered, a testament to the empire he had built. Alexander Sterling, a man whose name was synonymous with wealth and power, navigated the bustling streets in his chauffeured limousine. His world was one of cold, hard numbers, of acquisitions and mergers, a world insulated from the messy, inconvenient realities of everyday life. He was on his way to another high-stakes meeting, his mind already calculating profit margins and market trends. The tinted window was a barrier, a shield that kept the city's noise and its people at a comfortable distance. But on this particular evening, a small, frantic sound managed to pierce through that carefully constructed bubble. He glanced absently towards the sidewalk, his brow furrowed in annoyance. And then he saw her. A little girl, no older than 7, with tear-streaked cheeks and wide, terrified eyes. She was darting through the indifferent crowd, her small voice a desperate plea that was being swallowed by the urban cacophony. But Alexander heard it. Clear as a bell, it cut through the hum of the engine and the murmur of the city. "Please," she cried, her voice trembling. "Please, can anyone help?" People brushed past her, lost in their own worlds, their own haste. No one stopped. No one even seemed to notice. Something in her desperation held his gaze. He, who had walked away from countless deals and dismissed powerful people without a second thought, found himself unable to look away from this tiny, frantic child. On an impulse he couldn't explain, he tapped on the glass partition. "Stop the car," he commanded his driver, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. The driver, stunned by the unprecedented order, pulled over to the curb. Alexander Sterling, the man who never deviated from his schedule, opened the car door and stepped out into the chaotic symphony of the city street. The scent of rain-soaked pavement and exhaust fumes filled his lungs, a stark contrast to the filtered air of his limousine. He approached the little girl slowly, his expensive suit feeling absurdly out of place. As he drew closer, she stopped, her chest heaving with sobs. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and a sliver of hope. "Please, sir," she whispered, her voice raw. "Please save my brother." The words, simple and direct, struck him with a force he hadn't felt in years. They weren't a business proposal or a strategic request. They were a raw, unfiltered plea from the heart. In her eyes, he wasn't a billionaire or a titan of industry. He was just a man, a potential lifeline in a sea of indifference. "Save your brother?" Alexander repeated softly, crouching down to her level, an action so foreign to him it felt like he was moving in slow motion. "What's wrong with your brother?" The little girl, whose name he would soon learn was Lily, pointed a trembling finger towards a nearby alley. "He's sick," she sobbed. "He fell, and he won't wake up. Mommy said we don't have money for a doctor." The word money echoed in Alexander's mind. Money. The one thing he had in abundance, the one thing he understood better than anything else. Yet here, in this grimy alley, its value seemed to shift, to morph into something entirely different. It wasn't about power or luxury anymore. It was about a little boy's life. He followed Lily into the narrow, dimly lit alley. There, lying on a makeshift bed of cardboard, was a young boy, his face pale and his breathing shallow. A gash on his forehead was crudely bandaged with a piece of torn cloth. Without a second's hesitation, Alexander scooped the boy into his arms. The child was alarmingly light. "My car is right here," he said to Lily, his voice firm and reassuring. "We're taking him to the hospital, right now." He instructed his driver to race to the best private hospital in the city, the very one that bore his family's name on a wing he had funded but never visited. As the limousine sped through the streets, breaking every traffic law, Alexander held the unconscious boy, while Lily sat beside him, her small hand clutching his sleeve as if he might disappear. For the first time in decades, the numbers in his head went silent. The pending deal, the stock market fluctuations, the quarterly reports, they all faded into an insignificant hum. The only thing that mattered was the faint, shallow breath of the boy in his arms. At the hospital, the name Alexander Sterling worked like a magic spell. A team of doctors and nurses descended upon them instantly. The boy, whose name was Leo, was whisked away to the emergency room. Alexander stood in the pristine white corridor with Lily, who refused to leave his side. He made a single phone call, not to his broker or his lawyer, but to his personal assistant. "Cancel everything," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "For the rest of the week. For the rest of the month if necessary. I don't care." He hung up, the silence of the hospital corridor feeling more profound than the boardroom's hush. He looked down at Lily, who was watching him with an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. In her world, people didn't just stop. People didn't just help. The hours that followed were a blur. Alexander found himself sitting on an uncomfortable waiting room chair buying a small girl a cup of hot chocolate from a vending machine and listening to her talk about her brother, their mother, and their life in a small, cramped apartment. He learned that their mother worked 2 jobs and still barely made ends meet, that Leo had fallen from a rusty fire escape while playing, and that Lily's greatest treasure was a worn-out storybook her brother read to her every night. These were details from a world he knew existed, but had never touched, never felt. It was a world where a simple fall could become a life-or-death crisis, where the lack of a few $100s could be a death sentence. A doctor finally emerged, his face tired but hopeful. "Mr. Sterling," he began, "Leo has a severe concussion and some internal bruising, but he's going to be okay. You got him here just in time. Any longer and, well, you saved his life." The words hung in the air. You saved his life. It wasn't a business victory. He hadn't acquired a new company or outsmarted a competitor. He had saved a child. A wave of emotion so potent and unfamiliar washed over him. It wasn't the fleeting thrill of a successful deal. It was a deep, resonant warmth that settled in his very core. He looked at Lily, whose face had broken into a radiant, tearful smile, and he felt a joy more profound than any 9-figure profit. But the story didn't end there. Alexander made sure Leo received the best possible care. He also found their mother, a weary but proud woman named Maria, and listened to her story. He didn't just give her a check. He offered her a stable, well-paying job within his own company, one that utilized her skills and allowed her to provide for her children without working herself to the bone. He found them a safe, comfortable apartment in a good neighborhood, far from crumbling fire escapes and drafty windows. He watched as Lily and Leo explored their new home, their laughter echoing in the freshly painted rooms. He saw the relief and gratitude in Maria's eyes, and he realized he wasn't just giving them money, he was giving them a future. He was giving them hope. This single act of kindness triggered a seismic shift within Alexander. He started visiting the hospital wing he had funded, not for a photo opportunity, but to meet the patients and doctors. He established a foundation dedicated to providing free, high-quality medical care for underprivileged children, personally overseeing its operations. He started looking at his employees not as assets on a spreadsheet, but as people, as families like Lily and Leo's. His company's culture began to change, becoming more compassionate, more human. His ruthless business acumen was now tempered with empathy. He was still a brilliant businessman, but he was no longer just a billionaire. He was a benefactor, a protector, a man who had discovered the true meaning of wealth. Years later, Alexander would often say that it wasn't he who saved Lily and Leo that night. It was they who saved him. They pulled him from the cold, sterile isolation of his fortune and showed him a world of connection, of compassion, of love. He learned that the greatest return on investment isn't found in the stock market, but in a child's smile, in a mother's relieved tears, in the simple, powerful act of helping another human being. The encounter on that rainy city street didn't just change the lives of a desperate family, it redeemed the soul of a billionaire, proving that the true measure of a man's worth is not the money he accumulates, but the kindness he shares. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. Remember, a single act of kindness can change the world. See you next time.